Hello, and thank you for joining us for this presentation from Syntero on coping with grief, loss, and change during COVID-19. This presentation was created by Shelbey Mitchell. The first thing to ask is, why are we grieving? So when we think about grief and loss, the finality of death is often what comes to mind. But in reality, loss can be defined as a universal experience of change. So even small losses in life can trigger a sense of grief, and anything that involves loss can bring about this feeling. So a change in normalcy or routine or loss of expectations, all of these things that have come about as a result of COVID-19 are all things that can trigger a sense of grief in children and adults. And the changes related to COVID-19 has created feelings of grief, and it's important that parents support their child's unique grief experience and expressions of grief during this time. And it's also important, before we move forward, that parents do their best to process any of their own fears before talking to their children. The lost school year is something that can trigger a sense of grief. So no matter the child's age, the way that the 2019-2020 school year ended so abruptly has been dysregulating for everyone. So there are a lot of normal or typical milestones that students and families expect at the end of the school year that weren't able to happen. So things like prom, graduation, maybe parties at the end of the school year, saying goodbye to teachers and coaches and friends, a regular transition to middle school or high school, getting to visit colleges, all things that maybe were expected that didn't get to happen. And so this can contribute to a feeling of missing out, or a feeling of loss, or a feeling that these experiences were left incomplete. The stages of grief, if you look at that picture up on the right of the screen, there are, on the left of that picture is how we want grief to look and how we want grief to work, which is a very discrete line that has a clear starting point and a clear ending point, and it goes straight, and we know what to expect and we know what's coming. But next to that, you see an image of how grief actually works, which is messy and it's cyclical and it goes on for a long time, even past maybe when we thought we would be done grieving. Oftentimes grief is still going on. And grief is not linear. Kids move back and forth as they process through this. Adults do the same. And sometimes kids will have a good day, and then they'll lash out or break the rules or just have a meltdown. There are 5 main stages in the grief process. And again, these are not linear, and none of these stages are one and done. Children and adults will often cycle through these different stages. So the first stage is shock and denial. And in this stage, a child might say something like, "I can't believe I'm spending my senior year stuck at home," or that I'm missing prom or graduation. Or they may say, "This break is just temporary and I'm going to see my friends again soon." So denying the reality of what's actually going on. The second stage is pain and guilt. So thinking through, I should have said or done this while I was at school. Kind of taking pressure on oneself to have done things differently. The third stage of grief is anger. So a child might say, "I'm so mad this is happening," or "This is being blown totally out of proportion." And again, this is not a rational response or a thought that they've come to, but it's a reaction that comes from grief. The fourth stage is bargaining, saying, "If we stay home for a little bit, then I can see my friends again," or "This is just temporary and we're going to be back to school soon." So in this stage, a child who is making statements like this is trying to exert some kind of control over their environment. So they're trying to say, if I do this thing, then it will force this result. And in reality, that is not the way things work, and that's not the way COVID works. The fifth stage of grief is depression, reflection, and sadness. So a child might say, "Being at home all day is making me feel sad and lonely," and may even start to wonder, "Will I ever see my friends again?" And so in this stage is when a child or a person who's experiencing grief will really feel the sadness of the loss that they've experienced. So again, these stages don't go in order. They don't only happen once. If you remember back to that kind of messy picture of grief. A child may not start at the beginning. They may start at a different point or a different stage, and then move backwards and then forwards again. And things that maybe were dealt with before typically will come up again and need to be dealt with again. Some developmental grief responses based on age. In the preschool age, around 2 to 6 years, children may regress to thumb sucking or having toilet accidents, things that they had already grown out of. They may fear the dark or have nightmares or trouble sleeping. They may have irritability, stomach aches, or repeatedly ask questions. They may express their feelings and fears through their play, and hostile play is sometimes observed as they have trouble verbalizing their feelings. So what this means is children of this age are not going to come to an adult or come to a parent and say, I'm really feeling upset, or I'm sad, or they are not going to say, I'm experiencing grief because of the things I've lost through COVID-19. But these feelings are going to come out in other ways. So some of these behaviors, accidents, fears, physical pains, things that are new for that child may be a grief response. In slightly older children, ages 7 to 11, anxiety, depression, or anger may come out as physical symptoms, stomachs, headaches. Separation anxiety that wasn't there before could be an indication that they're feeling some grief. So maybe a child used to have no problem staying with a relative or another caregiver all day, and then suddenly that is becomes a big problem for them to be left. They will fear their own frailty. They may have an excessive fear that they themselves or their loved ones are going to get sick or something very bad is going to happen. And they may have persistent questioning. They may ask the same questions over and over and need those responses over and over again. They could have difficulty with attention and concentration. And again, they may return to behaviors that they had already outgrown. And appropriate support for children of this age. Again, that preschool age, those younger children around ages 2 to 6, is what they really need is providing reassurance from parents and caregivers, meeting them on their cognitive level and helping them express their emotions through play, drawing pictures, making up stories. So again, they're not going to really be able to talk to you about how they feel or tell you maybe what's upsetting them. But these feelings may come out through their play or through a picture they draw, or something like that. So encouraging them to engage in those types of activities as a way of expressing their emotions. Make it acceptable for children of this age to be angry or to cry, and provide as much as possible straightforward and consistent explanations to the questions that they repeatedly ask. So again, they may ask the same questions over and over, and to the best of your ability, trying to provide some consistency and an explanation that is as simple as possible in a way that they can understand. Also, go back to structure and routine as soon as possible to provide a sense of safety and security and a sense of knowing what to expect. So we're going to spend a lot of time later in this presentation talking more about structure and routine. For slightly older children, appropriate ways to support them would be to provide age-appropriate literature, and whether that's for the child to read on their own or something to do together with your child or as a family. Support your child while also fostering independence. Ongoing discussions are helpful to address their concerns and fears, also to help them process their emotions and questions they may have. So again, providing as consistent and simple explanations as you can. Model identifying your own skills. So even when you're feeling upset or nervous, saying so. Maybe saying, I'm feeling worried right now because of things that are happening in the world, or I'm feeling confused because I'm not sure what the accurate information is, and helping give your child those words to help them identify their own emotions when they're feeling them. Provide clear and realistic information. Model healthy coping skills. So again, things that your child could imitate when they're feeling negative emotions. Things maybe like getting outside or engaging in exercise or talking to a loved one. things that even a young child could imitate to help process their emotions in a healthy way. And finally, trying to set a daily routine can be very helpful for children of this age to have a sense of consistency and knowing what to expect from day to day. With older children and adolescents, even though they have increased verbal skills, they often still have a hard time verbalizing their emotions. So again, instead of maybe saying, I'm feeling upset, their feelings of grief or anxiety may come out in problematic behavior. So there is an image on the right side of your screen, and that blue image is an iceberg. So that top part above the wavy line is the top of the iceberg. So that's what you as a parent are going to see from your teenager. And you might see things like them spending excessive amount of time on a screen. They may be disrespectful or ignore others. They may complain or refuse to comply, fight with siblings or others. And then that wavy line is kind of the water line. And underneath is the rest of the iceberg. So that's what your teen may actually be experiencing, what they're feeling on the inside that you're just not able to see. So they may be just feeling bored. They may feel helpless or lack the skills to regulate themselves and regulate their emotions. They may feel disconnected from others. They might be worried or have fears or anxiety. They could feel powerless, misunderstood, and worry about their social status. Ways to support adolescents and teens during this time are to have open discussions about emotions that you're experiencing and that they're experiencing. So again, they may have a hard time verbalizing their emotions and may need help from parents and caregivers to identify maybe what exactly it is that they are feeling. But as their cognitive skills and their verbal skills are developing, they're more able to have discussions with adults about what they're feeling. But also, like I said, offering language for what feelings they may have. They may not be able to come up with the correct feeling words or come up with language on their own for what they're experiencing. Do your best to set clear responsibilities, boundaries, and schedules. So try to give jobs and chores on a schedule as opposed to out of the blue to help teens and adolescents feel like they know what to expect and they know what's coming and help them feel like they know what's expected of them. Again, model healthy coping skills and help teach your teen or your child things that they could imitate as healthy ways to deal with their emotions. Also recognize and validate their feelings. Don't minimize their experiences. So saying things like, well, other people have it worse, or there are others who are experiencing so much worse things than you. It's very invalidating for a teen to hear, and it makes them feel like the person saying that doesn't really understand them. And it's important at this time during the teenage years that students feel understood. So instead, saying things like, I understand, or I hear what you're going through, or just validating what they're saying is much more helpful than trying to compare it to what someone else is experiencing. Some other ways to support your child, really of any age, is to have a schedule or a routine that includes self-care and healthy meals every day. So in addition to things like homework or chores, also making sure that there's time to take care of themselves. Help them connect with friends and family through technology. Help them connect with you through physical contact in ways that your child prefers to receive that physical contact. So whether that's maybe a shoulder rub or a hug, just depends on your child's preference. Limit consumption of news, both in yourself and for your child. So it's important to stay informed and be aware of what's going on, but having the news constantly running or constantly checking for updates in the news is something that can feed anxiety both in adults and in kids. And finally, encourage self-compassion. And studies have shown that when we're compassionate towards ourselves, we're more motivated and more likely to achieve our goals. But when we're hard on ourselves, we are both the attacker and the attacked. So we put ourselves in the position of the bully and the victim. Remember that we are all in the same storm, but not in the same boat. So this means we've all experienced the same event, but we're not all experiencing it the same way. We're not all feeling the same emotions. And there's no right or wrong way to grieve. So some other things that you may notice in your child during this time are sadness and depressive symptoms, maybe crying or lashing out at others, sleeping more, or on the other hand, insomnia. Loss of interest, eating more or less, just some of those physical differences in sleep and eating. Externalized behaviors, they may push boundaries, have emotional outbursts. They may anticipate grief that's to come and may imagine that the future is going to be worse than it actually is, or they may have this what if thinking and imagine the worst possible outcome. Feelings and statements of despair, feeling out of control, or all or nothing statements. So you may notice things like saying, if things aren't perfect, then they're terrible. And that's an example of all or nothing thinking. And of course, above all, be patient. Your child will grieve in his or her own time. The only way past grief is through it, and there are no shortcuts. And take a deep breath, it gets better. And again, grieving is highly individual. There's no right or wrong way to grieve, so find a way that works for you. And 2 different ways that you may try would be reconstruction and working through. So maybe saying something like, perhaps there are ways we could turn this around and make the most of it. Asking your child, what can I do to help? So taking the situation that you're in and trying to see the positives, or seeing how you can make the most of a situation that really no one asked for and no one wanted. Allowing yourself to experience emotions as they come rather than fighting them off, and also understanding that it takes time and practice to be able to do this, to be able to experience your emotions. Another way to work through this grief can be through acceptance and hope. So saying something like, it is what it is, at least I have next year to look forward to. And so this is what's called radical acceptance. And this is not approval. It's not saying what happened doesn't matter or isn't important, but it's accepting that we can't change the current facts or what's going on, even if we don't like them. So accepting the fact that we can't change that, and looking for the future and seeing how can I use my skills and my internal resources to move forward anyway. These are just some tips on answering some questions that may come up. So different questions about how can we look forward to the future when we don't know what it's going to be like. And anxiety is common in transitions, even without the pandemic. And how can I learn to adjust and just roll with it? So all of the responses to these questions involve looking for the positive and looking for things you can control. So how can you prepare for the future? And how can you work to control your own reactions and thoughts, even though you can't control the external environment? Also, helpful things to work with your child would be to help them identify who they can reach out to for support when they need it. Also focusing on the big picture and big picture goals, and asking yourself or asking your child, what are they working towards overall? And how can they use this time to continue to work towards those goals? One final message on providing structure and routine is that it is important to stick to a routine, and children thrive with some kind of structure, and this helps them learn to regulate themselves. So it's recommended to provide structure and routine and balance schoolwork and chores with also time for fun and time for self-care. So a schedule may mimic a school day or a camp schedule and change activities at predictable intervals, perhaps considering alternating periods of study and play. It also could help to create a weekly schedule for the family every week and come up with different activities for the family to do together. So one day may need to be a time where we get chores done, and then another day may be a game night or a movie night or something fun for the family to do together, and having these highlights for children to look forward to. Could also be helpful to set a timer so that kids know when to transition between activities, and also giving them reminders of when it's time to put one thing away and move on to the next activity. Getting up, eating, going to bed around the same time every day helps to maintain that structure and maintain that consistency every day. Also, things like exercise, getting some physical activity in a safe way is also recommended to include in that schedule. It's also important to remember as parents and caregivers to take good care of yourself too. Your children need you to show them the way. Thank you so much for joining us for this presentation today. You will find links to forms to give us feedback as well as to get in contact with a Syntero clinician. Thank you so much.